Welcome to the Dennis Report. I'm Dennis Atchison. Recycling worldwide is a huge issue. It represents circular thinking, the ability to take a product all the way through full cycle to how it's used after the shelf life of the product's original purpose. Today's guest is going to walk us through how New Brunswick can do several things at the same time. We can create jobs, we can protect our environment, and we can create a balanced economy that other parts of the country can't do because of our geographic advantages.
Julianne, how do you do?
Today's guest is Pat McCarthy. He's the CEO of Recycle New Brunswick. He has a long history in forestry, which we'll try to connect how that connects to recycling, but might not be too much of a reach. Also, you should be aware that Mr. McCarthy is a Montreal Canadiens hockey fan, and it's been a tough go of late. So welcome to the show, Pat.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome.
Sit down and discuss with you.
Yeah, and just a quick touch on the Habs stuff. It's been a tough go of late, so.
Real tough go. I think they need more scoring.
Yeah.
But one thing we can look forward to this year is a good draft pick at the end of the year.
All right. And it wouldn't be part of a recycling program, would it?
No. No.
So Recycle New Brunswick, it's one of those areas that the province probably could have a breakthrough of some kind if it can hit to a certain scale. And maybe you're on the uphill side of trying to break through the paradigm shift necessary for everybody to catch how important this is. You want to speak a little bit to the public education side and what it's been like so far?
It's been a challenge, but New Brunswickers generally want to recycle.
Mm-hmm.
We've done surveys, and 80% of New Brunswickers want to recycle. It's the means or the method that you put in place for them to take the opportunity to recycle. Because with our programs, we've had real good success with our programs, and a lot of people are aware of the programs, and we can get into the programs a little later.
Yeah.
It's to, as you said, the uphill battle or the
perception shift, culture shift, something.
Culture shift, and it's a culture shift of, I think, the big one will be when the whole province goes to recycling, like curbside recycling, similar to the programs that they have in Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba,
Nova Scotia?
British Columbia.
Not
No,
the same?
Nova Scotia is not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, they're working towards it. I
Okay.
mean, they have a good program down there now, but it's more of an industry. It's more of an EPR program where industry can manage the program and pay for the program. Those options are available.
So maybe something right off the get-go is Recycle NB for you means something pretty specific.
Yes.
Joe Q Public might just hear the word recycle and think of it from municipal systems to provincial systems to everything from. So can you help them differentiate who you are and then how that meshes with the rest of the picture?
Absolutely. We get calls at the office every day on recycling almost everything. So we work with the regional solid waste commissions, so we direct some of those questions to the appropriate regional solid waste commissions. Recycle NB is a independent government agency that was established in 2008.
Kind of like NB Liquor and NB Power? Not quite a Crown Corporation.
Not a Crown Corporation. We're a separate independent organization. We do not get any government funds to run our programs.
Good point.
It is all consumers of the products that we recycle. The way it was set up in 2008, the government, and it was a good initiative from people in the department. I mean, they were really looking ahead at this. 1996, the New Brunswick Tire Stewardship Board was established.
Okay.
Started recycling tires, approximately 1 million a year.
Yeah.
And in 2007, 2008, they realized, well, there's other materials coming up that we want to manage on a provincial level, and designate the material. It's called We fall under the Clean Environment Act, under the designated materials. So once a material is designated, so first it was tires, then it was paint, oil and glycol, and then electronic waste in the next year or so will become part of it. So Recycle MB is made up of a board between 5 and 12 ordinary citizens from throughout the province, appointed by the minister.
Okay.
And they're independent of any industry. They have no industry interest, if you will.
Yep.
So it's a board. They're appointed for 3-year terms, and it's been working extremely well. We're an oversight board.
Yeah.
So the industry, and I'll take paint for example.
Yeah.
Paint was established in 2008. The brand owners of paint, such as Sherwood-Williams, and Benjamin Moore, and Home Hardware, they established with the regulations coming in, they have to choose who's going to manage their paint program. They can do it themselves, independent. Everybody run a program, or they can amalgamate and put a program together. They chose Product Care, who has been doing paint recycling throughout Canada for a number of years.
So Product Care is the name of a company that handles recycling of paint.
Yes, and it's a not-for-profit organization that they recycle the paint. Other jurisdictions, it's paint and household hazardous waste. They're all across Canada now, in the majority of the provinces, and they're moving down into the States with paint. Their specialty is managing recycling paint.
And how many in New Brunswick how many spots would there be, depots or locations?
I believe there's 63 depots, locations throughout New Brunswick where they collect the paint.
Okay.
The paint is collected at retailers. It's collected at some retailers, some beverage depot facilities.
Okay.
And the half of the paint is collected by the regional solid waste commissions.
Okay.
Because traditionally, that's where people brought their materials.
Yeah, that's what they associate recycling with.
Yeah. If I can just get back to
Sorry, good.
No problem. Recycle NB and the organization. We, like I said, we're an independent organization. We get our funding through consumers, and on a yearly basis, each industry has to submit each product, if you will, like the paint, Product Care with paint, has to submit an annual report to us saying how much they collected, how much they recycled. They have to submit audited financial statements, and they have to submit an independent audit of their management plan versus their actual operating plan. These reports we amalgamate those into our annual report, and you can see our annual report on our website. So there's a strict adherence to the regulations that each industry has to follow.
And when you say it's paid for by the consumer,
the way that works is tires is an old program established in 1996, so there's a visual fee. With EPR programs, most EPR programs in Europe and across Canada have integrated fees in them, meaning the price of the recycling is in on the price of the product. That's an advantage to the consumers in a number of ways. One way is, you can remember when we used to pay $99 for air flight from here to Toronto, and then by the time you're done, you're paying $299.
Yep.
Well, the airline industry, when you look a price up on a website now, the total price is there, and you can look at. So with EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility Programs, and that means that I should just, for the viewers, just say what that is that in blunt terms, if you produce a product, you're responsible for the recycling program at the end.
The full cycle of the product. And in your standard PowerPoint thing, and we'll put it into the edits, we'll put up the slide right now of the EPR program and its mechanics and how it works.
Yes, okay, yep. And so if you look at the way it works, the traditional recycling and garbage collection system was, if you live in Fredericton, for example, where I'm from, is you put it out a roadside, The town is responsible for picking it up, and it's the taxpayers. It's in on my tax bill. With extended producer responsibility, industry is responsible. So for the products that we have now, like paint, oil, and soon to be electronic waste, the industry will be responsible for setting up the program, the depots for the collection, the transportation, and the processing for that recycling. And generally, most products in EPR, the price is included in on the price of the product, as I mentioned before. And it's the same way as if you buy a gallon of paint, you pay the final cost. There's not a breakdown of the mining for the materials and the processing and the communications, and so it encourages industry to make products and put products out on the market that are relatively easy and inexpensive to recycle, because they're responsible for it at the end of the day.
It would be nice to be able to give a gold star to those industries for circular thinking or full cycle thinking, because a lot of industry thinks linear. I produce this, it's gone, I'm done.
And it's the general trend, and it's been going on for a couple decades in Europe.
Yes.
They have a lot of EPR programs. The price is in on the price of the product, and it's slowly, and I wish it was more rapid, going across Canada. Yeah. We're probably one of the first jurisdictions that had an EPR program for paint. The price is in the product of the paint.
So somewhere out in our television audience, there are some people saying, well, doesn't matter because I'm still picking up the tab for the full program. But you make a great point that it's all included in the cost. And the responsibility in the delivery has now shifted to industry to do that.
Absolutely.
And they can have efficiencies of scale that can't be achieved any other way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's okay to put that extra little bit of cost onto the consumer because the net result is significant.
Yes, yes. And everybody, and all of the products that use, all the paint that's sold in New Brunswick has to be part of the program. Yeah. They either have to be part of the Product Care, they have to join Product Care and be a member of that association, or they have to set up their own recycling program in New Brunswick. And I mean, through other programs, we've had different organizations look at setting a program up just for themselves, but they soon find that it's efficiency through the associations that are there, Product Care or whoever.
Scale, and networking and scale.
Yes.
So the breakthrough comes at that level.
Absolutely.
When you mentioned the Million Tires part of it, and that's the oldest program or the longest running program, I can't help but what a great visual would be, 1,000,000 tires out of little New Brunswick. So you want to do one of those Google Earth things and have 1,000,000 tires stacked up, and how far out into space would it reach, or how many times would it wrap around?
Yeah, because it's 1,000,000 tires. We're 750,000 people.
Yeah.
So we throw away a little more than a tire a year. Yeah. And it's a program that has kept, been going on since 1996. So it's every year since, and that'd be 20 years. Yeah. It's kept 20 million tires out of the landfill.
Out of landfill.
It not only...
That's stunning.
It keeps them out of the landfill. They all go to, vast majority, 95% of them go to Minto, and they're processed by Track. Track's the name of the private company out there that reprocesses them and recycles them and sells value-added products all over the world. They make over 70 value-added products out there and sell them all over the world. So it keeps those that rubber, steel, etc., out of the landfill site. So we're contributing to the wise use of resources. Mm-hmm. It provides employment in the Minto area. There's probably 50 plus people working with Track. That's between the transportation of all the tires there, plus the people in the factory.
And given the performance over the past 10 years or so, those jobs aren't going away anywhere.
No.
There's a constant demand or flow of that product to that place.
Yeah, and the citizens of New Brunswick, we get calls every day at the office, where do I take my tires? So there's still an education part there, but the Rubber Association of Canada a few years ago did a survey of all of the tire programs across Canada, and the one in New Brunswick came out #1 for people who understood it, what we're doing with our products, etc.
Did media give you much traction on that? That's another gold star.
Yeah,
you know?
a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah, but I can say over the last couple decades, we're the only jurisdiction that does not burn tires and does not bury tires, because it's value-added products. I mean, one large value-added product that they did a few years ago was the highway down here. When they were building the highway, they used tires, crumbed up tires, for a base of the road because it was on a wet area, and it's lighter.
This is the Trans-Canada between Frederick and Moncton? That part of the highway, or
no,
another
between here and St. John.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the #1.
Yes, on the #1 highway. So that was the only engineered program that we've had in New Brunswick so far. But other jurisdictions are looking at that. Tires are another aspect that they're looking at is in asphalt for tires. That you add a certain percent in for the asphalt. The asphalt lasts longer because it's flexible. It's less dangerous when it's right around freezing temperature because the water and the ice doesn't build up, and because there's give and take there. So there's it's a new process that they've tried in other jurisdictions.
Wow.
Yeah. So and I'm thinking an example would be on a bridge. That when you replace that on a bridge, the asphalt, this would be a good place to look at it to see if it would work for locations like that.
From both sides of the coin, the industry doing its EPR responsibility work, and then Recycle NB doing its networking, building the new ideas and implementing them work. It sounds like there's a chance for New Brunswick to have a bit of a breakthrough. Unrelated but connected. Constant talk about job creation, constant talk about economic development.
Yes.
IT gets so much attention. It's sexy, it's hot, it's new.
Yep.
But there's an impermanence to it in the culture of that work. It's a 3 to 5 year window, create the app, create the learning program, and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's a lot of mobility or shifting. Companies up for 4 or 5 years, gets bought by a bigger company, let's go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
You can't build a community, it can be one dimension to building a province or building a community, but you can't build it long term.
Yeah.
It sounds very much like your path is much more stable, predictable, and has more potential for that kind of long-term economic growth, good jobs. But is it sexy? You know how the IT stuff is sexy, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like a municipality fighting to have its wastewater management budget allocated properly so they can take care of long-term. But you'll hear many people say, but there's no hook to it. There's no.
Yeah.
How do we get the public to understand there's a huge hook to the work that you're doing?
Yes, and part of it is to get people to realize that we have finite resources on this earth.
Yes.
And for example, the tires, why not reuse those when you're done with it? Why not reuse paint if we can, the cans, and recycle the cans? Because a few years ago, I can remember I was on the History Channel. It was a show called Trashopolis, and it talked about Paris in the 1700s, and the group of people that made their living from, and I forget the name, made their living from recycling. They would go through people's garbage and discard in the 1700s, and they were recycling approximately 15% of what was there. And if you look at some of the recycling with the different commissions around the province, we're doing well to hit 10-15%. So I think we have to go back to what our grandparents used to do, in that if they got something in the house, they would keep reusing it until there was nothing left to it.
Yeah.
They didn't buy a lot of stuff because they didn't need a lot of stuff. So it's reuse, recycle, And we've got to get back to that. We've got to, and it's not sexy, we've got to get people to think about that. And if you look at the surveys with different age people, it depends what age you are and what you're going through. But it's got to be, we've got to make it easy for people to do it, and that it's they don't even have to think about it. It's for example, roadside collections, having Moncton's going to a 3-bag system, which is sort of paper, plastics, and then compost. And once we get people to think about that, then we can bring in programs that will, because there's one program in particular that can really jump the province ahead. It's the one that was implemented in British Columbia in 2014. And what it does is it will recycle approximately 60 to 65% of residential waste. We're probably at maybe 10, 15, 20% here in New Brunswick. And what it does, it's an EPR program. Industry manages it, finances it, and it'll put curbside, it has the potential to put curbside recycling everywhere in the province, because I forgot to mention that, any of the programs that we look at are province-wide. So we have to look at a provincial scale to it.
Equal access. But that would work to your benefit because the province is so small by population. Atlantic Canada is so small by population that you would need that full network.
Yes.
You had mentioned something before we went on air about pulling something. Maybe it was tires again. Did they come from Nova Scotia as well? There's a big depot in Moncton.
Well, yes, the oil and glycol program, which was started in 2014. As you know, oil can be a contaminant. I mean, one liter of oil can contaminate 1 million liters of water, so we have to be very careful with oil filters, oil containers, and glycol. And so when the program was starting to be set up, and it was Soguma out of Quebec that the brand owners chose to manage the program here in New Brunswick, they submitted a plan to us that looked at their collection, storage, processing of all of the different products when they were going to start this program. So one of the companies that you mentioned, RPM, it's a plastic recycling company out of Montreal, and they've been operating in Montreal and Ontario for decades. They looked at the potential in New Brunswick, and they thought, well, New Brunswick is the first province to implement this oil recycling program, oil and glycol. For a business sense, why don't we look at setting a facility up in Moncton? So what they did was they built a special warehouse in Moncton. About 6 months ago, I was talking to them. They had about 5 employees that collect all of the empty oil containers and the empty glycol containers in New Brunswick. I think there's 1,300 locations in New Brunswick that they pick up. Prince Edward Island just started a program last year, about mid-year last year. So they're collecting the ones in Prince Edward Island. They bring all the containers to Moncton. They crush them and drain them because they have 2 levels of drainage in the facility, so nothing can get into the soil, oil or whatever. They put them on sealed pallets and put them in a van, send them to Montreal. They're further decontaminated, take the oil taken out. They're crushed up. The plastic's crushed up because it's good quality plastic because it's a little thicker than the PET bottles. And they eventually make it into water drainage tile. You see the big black drainage tile along the roadsides every once in a while. So it's a process where they've refined it and they're making money out of it. And they're also looking at the reason why they set it up in Moncton. They're looking at doing it for Nova Scotia too when Nova Scotia comes onto the program.
Good.
One thing I will mention is if you look at just a landfill versus recycling, there's about a 1 to 7 upscale of jobs in recycling. So you know, if you look at Minto, what we have there is a facility that you know, 50 people or so are working at that. You know, that replaced how many landfill jobs? So, and what it is, what we're looking at, we've cooperated, we've worked with the solid waste commissions over the years. They're great partners because they collect a lot of the materials that we send on for recycling. So it's, you know, it's Recycle NB, but it's also partnerships between government, industry, solid waste commissions, retailers, beverage container depots. It's working together, New Brunswickers. And I'm just trying to think, all of the programs started to date use New Brunswickers for the collection, et cetera. What Product Care, for example, looks at is they look at the province they're going into, and they'll use the trucking facilities, the companies
Local.
that are in that province. So they're using, so it's providing local jobs to the people.
So this is one of those quiet, successful New Brunswick stories that's really hard to get to the front page.
Absolutely, because it's not sexy.
Yeah, and you know, I was an easy phrase to use about not sexy, but at the same time it kind of is, because the world's changed.
Yes.
And the world's population is going to double by 2050. Consumer-driven GDP in North America can't sustain itself anymore.
No.
And we need to change how we think, which goes back to our grandparents' or great-grandparents' era, or First Nations
Absolutely.
with 6th generation, 7th generation thinking.
Absolutely.
And you're already doing it. You're an example of how it's done. It's just, how do we get it into the narrative is the big thing.
And part of getting it into the narrative is over the last several years, I've gone around to Rotary clubs throughout the province, different mayors, different councillors, regional service commissions, to tell them, explain to them who Recycle NB is, what programs we have, and how the programs work, and what the information I've been given and what we're trying to stimulate, if you will, is the thought process of, well, there's other avenues. Instead of, you know, what we can do is work with the regional service commissions, solid waste commissions, to put programs in place that do more recycling. Because there's a gentleman that I work with mentioned that you know, someday we might be going back to all of these landfill sites to mining the resources. So let's jump ahead to think about how can we keep it out of there. And tires, paint, oil are good examples. I mean, we'll get into e-waste recycling, electronic waste. There's approximately, estimates are that New Brunswickers discard about 3,500 tons of e-waste a year. There's good programs going on right now, but they're ad hoc. There's one in Edmundston with ResNet. They have a good facility up there that's been recycling for years. There's Beaver Dam recyclers around Fredericton. The Moncton Regional, the Solid Waste Commission down there have been, you know, collecting transports loaded with recycling, with old TVs, electronic waste, and sending them to Montreal for a number of years. So it's an ad hoc program. What the provincial government did last October is pass regulations under the designated material regulations to bring in an electronic waste recycling program. It's going to be very similar to the one they have in Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island. It's EPRA that looks after it. It's a national organization, and their specialty, it's a not-for-profit, their specialty is recycling electronic waste. So they're very good at it, and it's a company, it's an association that the brand owners of electronic products chose to do it in New Brunswick.
Great. Maybe that's a good place to pause. We're going to give our audience a brief break, and we'll be right back.
Mile marker, count 'em off, son. Between what once was and what's begun.
when we left you, we were just about to begin a discussion on electronic waste management, and we'll pick up from there.
Thank you. Electronic waste, as I mentioned before, provincial government brought in regulations in October 2015 for electronic waste. And there's in the regulations, there's timelines and specific regulations, specific things that industry has to do.
For implementation of a strategy or design of a strategy?
For the design of a strategy and the implementation of the strategy, because once the regulations are in place, governments back away.
They feel they're done?
Yes.
Okay.
Because they've given the oversight role to Recycle NB.
Okay.
For a designated program, electronic waste, for example. So by approximately mid-April, industry has to have a management plan into Recycle NB, and what's included in a management plan is where the depots are going to be, the number of depots, the collection, the processing, where it's going.
All the infrastructure.
All the infrastructure and all that. It doesn't have to be specific to, it's going to be at Joe's barbershop, but so many in each community.
So was there an inventory done before, or that has some sense of the volume involved? Because cars, and you can know tires and cars and the transition rate. So electronics, I still have images from social media of Japan, landfill.
Yep.
On average, people in Japan had 5 cell phones each, and they would flip them every 18 months or so as a consumer product as opposed to a utility.
Yes.
And it showed this mountain. It was one of those horrific photos of this mountain of cell phones that, 3 or 4 stories high. And you got the bulldozer down here plowing them and stuff.
Yeah.
Do we have any sense of our version of that?
We have approximately how many kilograms or tons of product we're going to collect in a year, and it's estimated at 3,500 tons, New Brunswickers per year. And what that's based on is other jurisdictions that have been recycling and what we buy. So they have a pretty good estimate of how much it's going to be. One thing I'll mention about cell phones, the beauty with cell phones right now is that the companies that sell them have a voluntary program in place throughout New Brunswick, I'm assuming throughout Canada, because cell phones, there's valuable resources, valuable products in there, so they want to recycle that product. It's a volunteer program. Cell phones are also included in on electronic waste. So
they've got two avenues now, right?
Yes.
They can put it back in the plastic bag and mail it back to where they bought it?
Correct.
Or the manufacturer?
Correct.
Or they can go to you?
They'll go to, there'll be depots all over the province. So once we get the management plan, sometime in mid to late April, we're going to look at it and to see that everything in the regulations is covered in the management plan. Once we approve the plan, so it'll be probably early summer, midsummer, where I'll bring it to my board of directors for Recycle in New Brunswick. And, upon our recommendations that, this plan meets all the regulations, they'll approve the plan. And then industry has 6 months from the date of approval to have the program up and running. Maximum is 6 months. Minimum, they can do it in a month or two. I mean, oil and glycol, we approved the plan, I believe it was October 2013, and by the start of 2014, they had the program running. So
4
different
months,
products,
4 months.
So it's quick. Electronic products, I know we have to be sensitive to the holiday season because that's their biggest time of the year, and the program's either going to start mid to late summer this year or early next year, because we don't want to, we want to make sure that we work with retailers, et cetera, to get the program up and running.
A lot of steps to the implementation phase, I would imagine,
yes.
to make sure everyone's on the same page before you start.
Yes, and what they'll do is, it's going to be local businesses, local transportation companies that are going to be integral in this program. So there'll be a representative from EPR EPRA in the province that will work with transportation and depots, et cetera. Because we have, as I mentioned earlier in the show, we have some locations in New Brunswick that recycle now, such as ResNet up in Edmonton. They've got a great program going there. It's ISO certified. And right now they're processing some products from the Nova Scotia program. So they've been setting themselves up with the processing to do some of that. And there's other companies across New Brunswick that will be part of that program.
And a thought just popped in my head. Says that means somewhere out there, there's a market for what those recycling programs produce. Because you hear it a lot with newsprint. And Joe Q Public typically will confuse things, or it's hard to be clear sometimes. So newspapers are in decline. The demand for newsprint goes down. Recycling newsprint no longer has a market it used to have. It used to be a prime thing. So it sounds like in electronics, as in tires or as in glycol and paint, that there's the processing plant for recycling, breaking it apart, finding what's, but somewhere out there, there's a market that wants to buy that.
That's correct. And to access those markets, whether it's tires or electronic waste, what you have to do is break the commodities out. Like in electronic waste, the rare minerals, break it out, the plastics, the metals. So if you can have a process that will break those materials out, there is a market. It's an open.
Is the market the States? Is it China? Because where I wanted to go with it excitedly was the deep water ports we have. Because constantly in the media or through the typical political narrative, we need to create jobs and we need to use the ports better, and people talk about oil and gas and natural gas and fracking. They won't talk about what you're speaking, but we do have stories of a lot of raw waste being thrown onto huge container ships and going over to China to get processed there.
Yes.
So it's different, same process, but different details. Is there a breakthrough we can have that New Brunswick can actually do the value-added thing right here in New Brunswick for a whole range of products?
For some products, yes. It's the challenge we have in New Brunswick, as we mentioned earlier, is the economy of scale. I mean, we're 750,000 people. I mean, and that's where we get into the Maritime provinces has to work together to foresee that, we can't have a tire processor in every small province.
No.
But maybe we can have a good one here. We can have another facility for another product in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
Or, we've got to work together because we're a small population, and we've got to work on that.
So 2 million people building an infrastructure that has several hubs.
Yes.
And it's, we can drive anywhere in 6 hours.
Yes.
So that's nothing compared to other places.
And if you drive south or southwest, you've got a huge market down there.
Yeah.
So getting back to, the products, the byproducts, if you will, that come out of electronic waste.
Yes.
I believe most of them are used in North America.
Okay.
So it's good that way because we've got lots of manufacturing in Quebec, Ontario, or the United States. It's interesting what you see we were at a conference out in British Columbia. No, it was in Banff, Alberta, just several months ago, and there was a gentleman on there. The name of the book was Junkyard. The World is Junkyard, or anyway, great author, and he was there and he talked to us about recycling and what China's doing. And I mean, we hear a lot of horror stories about what's happening in China, but there's also there's also success because he showed us, for example, Christmas lights.
Okay.
We collect Christmas lights in North America, put them in containers and ship them over there.
Okay.
They land on the ports, and there's what he was showing us is, there was probably 30 or 40 buyers, Chinese buyers, and they would bid on those containers. They'd bring them back and they showed them, breaking them down and using the products. So
fascinating, eh? And think of the carbon footprint. of
Yes.
that going all the way across.
Yeah,
And so there's that side. But what you just described, it almost sounds like the fishing industry, the way the price is established for crab or lobster, and the Japanese market is on the wharf in Nova Scotia or New Brunswick.
Yeah.
A grade, B grade, C grade,
Yeah.
that kind of bidding exercise. And it makes me also think of that TV show where people would bid on the stuff in a abandoned storage shed, kind of.
exact storage wars or
Yeah,
whatever.
that thing.
Yeah,
But it all points to, like 20 years ago, there wouldn't be that conversation.
no,
And here's little New Brunswick has an opportunity because we can move faster, quicker, later because we're so
Yep.
small.
Yep.
As long as it integrates with
Yes.
the rest of the Atlantic
Yeah.
Canada. And we've got all those deep water ports.
yeah. And what we've got to do is take the materials we have, and if you look at what we throw away on a daily basis, is there's a huge amount of material there. I mean, you and I were talking earlier about our grandparents that didn't have very much and they didn't throw very much. What we've got to do is look at what we have and how can we keep that and remanufacture or demanufacture, whatever you want to say, to make a commodity, to create a commodity that people can use. And I mean, a great example, again, I'll go back to tires
Yeah,
in Minto.
Yeah.
I mean, they sell those products all over the world.
yeah. Long-term stable work. And using the electronics one as an example, in that business plan, is there a forecast for how many long-term jobs would be created through it?
No, there's no forecast for long
Job.
number of jobs, but we know from the studies that 1 to 7 for every landfill job you're going
Right.
to have 7 recycling jobs. And what's happening now is 3,500 tons are going to, a portion of them are going to recycling, but probably a huge portion is going to the landfills. So what this program is going to do is divert all of it throughout New Brunswick, and there'll be collection depots in every community out there. What it's going to do is divert that to recycling, which is
That's great.
and the beauty with going with EPR, it's a national Canadian organization that has very high standards that their products do not end up in third world countries. They have auditing systems in place. They have it's a not-for-profit, so they know that the consumers don't want to see. What the consumers want to see is a safe, environmentally friendly product that's going to be recycled in Canada, and that if they give a hard drive or a laptop, is that material, that information is not going to be in somebody else's hands. So EPR they're very adamant on their standards and how they're going to process that. And everybody that they're connected to, and I'll mention ResNet again, that's why ResNet set up their standards, ISO standards, is that they can process that material.
Yep.
So,
And like tires or paint, the cost is buried in or attached to the purchase of the product.
the tires is the old program, and it hasn't been converted over to an EPR program, so it's
Okay.
still visual.
Okay.
The paint is included, oil's included, so
And
it's
electronics would
included.
be included.
Electronics is going to be
Great.
included in on the price of the product.
Is it fair to say that industry in this respect is a little bit ahead of the curve with wanting to implement this and full cycle of the product compared to the consumer? The consumer needs to change the behavior is where I'm trying to go.
Yeah, I think you're right, especially in Canada. If we compare it to our neighbors to the south,
Okay.
Canada they see and the consumers see the benefits of EPR programs.
I mean, the consumer has the heart, but they don't
Yes.
seem to have the knowledge or the practice.
Correct, because as I mentioned before, 80% of New Brunswickers want to recycle.
Yeah.
But if you I'm from Grand Falls. If you live in Grand Falls, there's very little opportunity. I lived in Campbellton for years. Very little opportunity. So what we've got to do, this is a great lead-in segment for
Yeah.
packaging and printed paper.
Okay.
Because it's we did late 2013. We as in Nova Scotia, PEI, ourselves in Newfoundland decided that we're going to do a study on what a packaging and printed paper recycling program would look like for the Atlantic provinces. So what we did was we asked some experts in Canada, and there was a couple out of Ontario. We asked them, here's a proposal. Would you write this report for us? Benchmark European countries, benchmark Canadian companies and Canadian jurisdictions, benchmark wherever you can in the world that has good practices for packaging and printed paper. They submitted a report to us in early 2014. It's on our website if anybody wants to read it. And what it is, it's a draft proposal. The title of it is, it's a long title, Framework and Implementation for a Waste Packaging and Paper Stewardship Program across Atlantic Canada. What it looked at is every jurisdiction. It looked at what was there now for recycling, the facilities that are available, how everybody's doing it, and what an Atlantic program would look like. And if I took just one lesson out of this for our recycling programs, our future recycling programs, is that as an area with a small population, and we want economy of scale, and to make sure the industry does it, the most cost efficient, is that if we can get the Atlantic provinces, if we can get just the list of products to recycle the same in every province, that's going to be a huge step on our recycling program.
Great.
So again, I would encourage people to look at that program, and I want to get into it a little.
Yep.
Last May, we had a one-day workshop. We brought the authors in and some other experts from across Canada into Fredericton. We invited mayors and councillors, regional service commissions, Aboriginal communities, different people. We had over 100 people there. We had a one-day workshop. The experts presented the report and how it would, how potentially it would work, and then we had a question and answer at the end of it, and it was extremely well received. I mean, there was good questions, and actually the workshop should be on our website in the next couple months. So all the presentations, the questions, etc. So we see this as part of our outreach to communities to engage them in thinking about programs, EPR programs, and where the next steps would be. And the programs across Canada, if you want to take an example, that the programs that are out there that are working now is Quebec and Ontario have had them for at least 10 years. Manitoba is more recent, and British Columbia was in 2014. British Columbia went from what we have here is just different regional and city landfill
geographic
sites.
Challenges, population, demographic challenges.
To a packaging and printed paper program that industry would manage and finance and look after the recycling. So it was a huge change for them. I mean, there's always growing pains. There's always things that you have to implement, but it's been a huge success. What they look at is between 60 to 65% of residential waste can be recycled. That's figures from Quebec, Ontario, British Columbia.
Yeah.
And if you look at this program, the cost of that program is, and a lot of people would argue, the cost of the program is always already in the cost of the product. So when you buy a bottle of shampoo, with national pricing, you pay the same here in Walmart, for example, that you would pay in Ottawa at Walmart.
Yep.
Well, the price of the recycling is in the one in Ottawa.
Yep.
And we pay the same price. So are we paying for it but not getting the service? So what we want to do now is let's ask for the service.
Yes, and that gets into some plastic bottle recycling in Corp, New Brunswick, and trying to make sure the money's going where it's supposed to be going, so the service can be provided.
Yes, yeah, and
full cycle on the money, not just full cycle on the products, but full cycle on the money.
Absolutely, and the full cycle on the money. I want to mention is that the paint program, for example, or oil, is those companies, Product Care example for the paint,
Yep.
they have to send us on a yearly basis audited financial statements. So what they take in,
Yep.
what they expense on, and what's left over.
Are they
And
set up as not-for-profits?
not for profits.
Okay.
Yeah, because what it is industry.
Well, the money goes back into the system.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and we recoup our costs from the paint program, for example. We'll give them an estimate on how much time and effort for 2016 we're going to put into the paint program based on our, knowledge of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll give them an estimate, and they'll pay the bill for that. The paint program will. So it's a cost recovery. We can't,
Yeah.
and we can't cross-subsidize programs. We can't. The tires collected for
Good
paint,
point.
tires,
Yeah.
that's money stays there.
It's
So
got to be contained within that sector or that industry.
that's correct. That's why the third-party audits are critical. That's KPMG or whoever accounting firm
Yeah.
audits us and them. And so what we're looking at is in this program of packaging and printed paper in New Brunswick,
Yeah.
we're looking at, and this is from the study. These aren't my figures. This is from the study. It's worth approximately $15 million a year.
Yeah.
That industry will finance, if you will,
Yeah.
once the regulations are there.
Somewhere out there, there's industry just banging on their chest going, recognize the good stuff we're doing, you know?
And they are doing great stuff
Yeah.
in all those other provinces.
Yeah.
And they're not, industry doesn't object to this, and the Retail Council of Canada has got no problem with this. What they want is to make sure that they're in on the initial ground level, thought process and consultation, because they know it's good for them. They know it's good for consumers, good for the province. And one thing that when the Department of Environment, the government decides, well, let's look at this to see when we're going to bring this program in, because the government's always looking at EPR programs. Which one is the next one we're going to bring in?
Okay.
Because it's, it was paint, oil, electronic waste. Those are big ones.
Yep.
Batteries, sharps, etc. Those are smaller programs, still very important.
Construction? Because I've read stats somewhere where landfill, the number one item going in the landfill is construction.
Yes, and that's on their radar. I don't know where, because
Yeah.
I guess we get it when it's on after it's been regulated.
Yeah, and there's a different risk to the products that fall
Absolutely.
under your thing, which is more important. That 1 liter of oil and 1 million liters of water, that's sacred.
Absolutely, and I mean, it's not that people were deliberately, throwing away oil, because when the program started, there was guidelines and figures in the regulations that had to be met for recycling and collection.
Yeah.
Well, we found that, take used oil for example, it was a lot lower than we anticipated, like from other provinces, but it was because used oil is allowed to be burnt in the province in approved furnaces.
Okay.
So a lot of garages, and I mean,
Or
there's garages in
incinerating.
Fredericton that
Yeah.
use it for heat.
Or
If they have an
incinerating.
approved furnace. So getting back to this packaging and printed paper, it's worth $15 million a year, and the price of that recycling is in the price of the product, because what we're talking about is shampoo bottles, packaging for USB cords, or so.
There's
so
a lot
it's
of
built
packaging.
in.
Yes.
And what it does is each industry, excuse me, will pay a small portion of what that costs to recycle it. Consumers. It's the consumers that are going to pay. It's not industry. It's consumers pay everything.
Yep.
If consumers weren't there, they wouldn't.
Right. But there's an interesting chain, and we have about a couple minutes left, so think about how you might want to end. But it's interesting to watch. A company creates a product for a profit. The community will be the consumers that buy it.
Yes.
But now industry is closing the loop a little bit by putting a fee into it. that then manages what happens with that product when it becomes waste.
Correct.
And that saves the community an awful lot of effort and environmental challenges by going through a full cycle process. So I just wanted to make sure it surfaced that there's the benefit isn't the consumers picking up the cost, because there's something else that happens at a not-for-profit scale scale
Yes.
that helps the environment and community as a whole.
Absolutely.
And that's shared, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
So a couple minutes left. How do you want to close this out?
Okay, just before I close it out, I want to mention something else
Good.
with this, because in every jurisdiction that PPP has been implemented, price of the products did not go up a penny. And again, that's not my opinion. That's the experts in it. And what it does is any EPR program, it recycles resources, and it also is a benefit to local communities. And I'll give you an example. Benefit to local communities financially. Consumers, and I always say this, consumers pay for everything. So if a program is brought into EPR program to recycle products, PPPs, worth $15 million a year to New Brunswickers. That means that the money that's being spent today on collections and recycling, well, industry is going to finance a portion of that. So what that does is, and I'll be selfish for a minute, me as a taxpayer in Fredericton, if this program comes in, well, I'm going to be paying less taxes on this.
Yes.
So that either means that those taxes can pay for social services or programs that we want, because it's going to be. So there's a relief there for municipal communities, municipal governments, which is extremely important.
There's strong complementarity and a nice balance to it too.
Yes, yes.
We have maybe 15, 20 seconds to close out. Thoughts?
Thoughts. EPR, extended producer responsibility, is the way we're going. It's been going across Europe. It's going across Canada. Eventually get down to the States. It's about partnerships that, whether it's us, government, industry, there's a lot of partners in there, and there's a lot of conversations that have to take place for that, and user pays. If you use tires or paint or whatever, is that a small portion of that's going to go into the recycling costs.
Great. This has been fascinating. We can go on for another couple hours. Maybe we'll continue it another day. But thanks so much for coming.
Thank you very much for inviting us, and it's been a pleasure.
Great. So if you watch the credits at the end of the show, or when you go on YouTube or Facebook to look at the Dennis Report there, we will provide links to the different things that Pat mentioned. As always, thank you for watching. Be good, have fun, and love each other.
Mile marker, count 'em off, son.